Awesome. Cool. We are live. We'll be starting here in just a moment. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started so we can enjoy the most of this presentation tonight. So as you wrap up your conversation, just want to say thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm super excited about this one. I guess just right off the bat, raise your hand if you've already seen Doug and Jeanne do something similar to this before. Oh, really? Oh, I thought it'd be more people who'd already seen it. That's even better then. So you're really in for a treat tonight. So I'll let them do the talking about this one. As per usual, I'm going to talk about our other events so that you're aware. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to pass these around for Tipsy Rose. As Sherelle noted, they actually just go ahead and take one and pass it down. If you don't want one, you can pass it on. These are the menus and order cards for Tipsy Rose. It's a local business and food truck and drink vendor. They totally renovated an old horse trailer in order to make that food truck. So they'll be at the Chili Festival this weekend too. And I see several of you have gotten drinks. So have I. I got the Pike Peak Drink that she invented for tonight. So a couple of, actually several events. We've got our Final Friday art show. All of the art in here is done by artists Sabas Razo and Then Hand Art. They actually made every single piece together. And then before you leave, feel free to actually make your mark on that art. Those two art pieces back there. They're meant to be collaborative art pieces. Then our first Friday art show for the next artist, because we have a new local artist in here every month, is Christy Furman. She'll be in here and she'll have her art show here all month in October. So her first Friday event will be October 6th. Then our next Heritage Night, which is similar to this, is Pride City Marching Band. Has anyone ever heard of Pride City Marching Band? Yeah, so it's going to be really big. We're going to get a new exhibit next year. In fact, it's already in the process of being donated to us from the State Fair where it used to be. So we're very lucky to get that exhibit. So we'll be launching a fundraising campaign so we can make that exhibit the best it can be, because we're not just going to take the exhibit as it was and pop it over here. With the help of alumni, we're actually going to make it even better. So that'll be happening in 2024. So our next Heritage Night, all the flyers for events I'm talking about are right over there, will be October 18th. It's always the third Wednesday of the month, same time. And then, of course, other events like a volunteer celebration and membership meeting. You can see more information about that over here again. I'll throw the dates at you. Then, of course, we're going to be relaunching our Indigenous Peoples exhibit. We're already been preparing for this for months. This will be on November 3rd. It's a free event, free day for the museum. All-day event with cultural dances, kids events, and, of course, relaunching our Indigenous Peoples exhibit with some new improvements and much more. And then we'll also have an Indigenous Heritage Night that month in November, because November is actually Indigenous Heritage Month. And then to wrap up the year, we're actually going to be having a holiday party. So you're one of the first people to hear about it. The details are being ironed out, but it's actually December 2nd. The time is tentatively about 2 to 6, 2 to 7 p.m., but just know Saturday, December 2nd, we're still determining the time. And we'll also be featuring all of our local authors and a lot of people who are in the gift shop as well at that event. So this overview is over here, so feel free to take a picture of it as we work on making this an updated version here soon, as well as all the flyers to our events. And I do also want to call attention to Damon Days. That's not our event, but some people that we're connected to are doing some Damon Days events at the library Monday, the 25th of September, and also a vintage car show on October 6th. So that's part of Damon Runyon Days. So I think that's enough of my shtick. We also have memberships, opportunities for volunteering. We totally need it as not only a museum, we're also a heritage center, really bringing people together here. So we really appreciate you being here today. It is a free event, And feel free to use a donation box or let me know if you want to do a digital donation if you'd like to help out for a donation tonight. I think that is it. I'm going to go ahead and ask that we do a round of applause for Pike, the Pike family.
Thanks, Morel. Hi, and welcome. My name is Jeanne Baxter, and the striking gentleman standing next to me is my husband, Doug Baxter. We are volunteers for the Pueblo Heritage Center's Legacy Walk program. We are the parents of the Pike trunk. Generally, we do our presentation to fourth grade students, so this is going to be a little different for us, but we do it to students in fourth grade because they're learning about Colorado history, and we tell the story of why Pike was here in Colorado, particularly here in Pueblo. So as Doug tells you the story, he will be in first person. I will interject occasionally as his wife, Clarissa. After that, he will come out of character and he would like to discuss some of the politics and intrigues, thank you, it was a word that was skipping, about the time, at the period of time. After that, we will have a short question and answer session, and then we would like you to view, although I've noticed a lot of you already have, view some of the artifacts that Pike and his men would have used on the trail and around the camp. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Captain Zebulon Montgomery Pike.
Well, greetings, citizens. My name is Zebulon Montgomery Pike, and of course, you met my beautiful wife, Clarissa. I just returned from the expedition into the Louisiana Territory, my Southwest expedition into Louisiana Territory. And I'm here tonight to tell you about that expedition and my life as a soldier and explorer. I was born in 1799 in Lamberton, New Jersey. My father, also Zebulon Pike, was a soldier, and he fought in the Revolutionary War many times alongside George Washington. Clarissa's father, also Captain John Brown, fought in the Revolutionary War, and he also fought alongside General Washington. Well, after the Revolutionary War, my father left the Army, and he thought he was going to be a farmer. I'd never farmed before, but he went to Western Kentucky, where there was a lot of available land, and he also thought he would speculate in land too. He bought a farm and he bought some land, and he was successful for a while, but economic conditions at the time were hard, and he fell upon hard times. Well, also too, in the Western territories, Western Pennsylvania, Illinois Territory, Ohio Territory, Indiana Territory, there was a lot of conflict between the settlers and the natives, and a lot of bloodshed. And anyway, in 1794, the United States decided to protect their citizens moving west. They would create a standing army. Before, they had always relied on militias. And Thomas Jefferson created a standing army. And my father, I guess, not being able to make it, joined the army and joined as a captain. And he was stationed in the far west along the Ohio River, helping build a string of forts to help protect the citizens from the natives who were quite hostile. I grew up around my father's soldiers, and I loved being around my soldiers, listening to their stories of war and adventure. So guess what? All I wanted to be was a soldier. And I hope that someday I might be a famous soldier, or maybe even a famous explorer. I was stationed along the Ohio River, running freight between Fort Massac, Fort Washington, and some of the other forts there. And I was a very patriotic and dedicated soldier. I loved my country. I loved my job, and I wanted to be successful. So in 1799, while I was running freight up the river, I got promoted. I got promoted to a second lieutenant, and I was pretty happy about that. My career was taking off. Later that year, I got promoted to a first lieutenant, and I got noticed by General James Wilkinson, who was commander of the U.S. Army. General Wilkinson saw how dedicated I was and what a hard worker I was and patriotic. And I'm sure the wheels were turning for him, and he thought, this is a man I can use. In 1800, as I was shuttling freight and helping protect the citizens along the Ohio River, I often visited my John Brown's plantation in Sugarland, Missouri, Sugarland, Kentucky. And there I met and fell in love with my beautiful first cousin, Clarissa Harlow. And anyway, this is a little bit of a love story, and I don't want to tell it, but Clarissa will.
Well, thank you, my love. I shall then. As he said, yes, we are first cousins. Kissing cousins, you might say. Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah, his mother, Isabella Brown Pike, and my father, Captain John Brown, are sister and brother. Now, my father was after the Revolution, my father did go to Kentucky, and he was very successful at farming. As a matter of fact, he was so successful, he had a 20,000-acre plantation that he called Sugar Grove. My father had me formally educated. I am fluent in Spanish, French, and of course English. And of course, it was his wish that I would marry rich or in the upper class. So needless to say, he was very upset with the courtship that Zebulon and I had started. Not because we were cousins, but because he wanted me to marry rich and upper class, and Zebulon was not that. He was a soldier in the army, and my father did not want me to endure the very hardships of living on the frontier. But again, I am my father's daughter. I am headstrong, I am smart, and I'm very much in love. So we eloped to the frontier town of Cincinnati in the August of 1801. In February of 1803, we were blessed with our first child, a little girl who we also named Clarissa. She is the only one of the four of our children to survive infancy. Well, my father threatened to disown me. But like I said, I was in love. I do not regret at all the decisions I made. However, to this day, my father still refuses to speak to me. And trust me, he was correct. There was a lot of hardship and heartache on the frontier. I hated life in the forts. It was very mundane and tedious. And the women shunned me because I was an officer's wife and I was educated. I just don't know why, but they did. But thankfully, I had my beautiful little daughter to help me get by on those very hard times. Again, I wouldn't change anything at all because he's been so worth it.
Thank you, Clarissa. Clarissa did endure a lot, and I love you for that. Anyway, that was 1803 when we had our daughter, Clarissa. And that was a very momentous year for the United States. 1803, President Thomas Jefferson had the incredible offer to buy the Louisiana Territory, which is all this land between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains, 828,000 square miles of land for only 13 cents an acre. Yeah, quite a bargain. Basically doubled the size of the United States. Well, very few Americans had ever been out to the Louisiana Territory. And Thomas Jefferson wanted to find out what was out there, what he had bought. And so he sent explorers out to explore the Louisiana Territory. And in 1803, I was a commander of Fort Kaskaskia on the Illinois River. And he was sending Lewis and Clark out, and they were collecting men and supplies for their expedition up the northern part of the Missouri River and to explore the northern part of the Louisiana Territory all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Lewis and Clark stopped at Fort Kaskaskia, and Captain Lewis asked me, he said, President Jefferson is looking for very capable Army officers who would like to explore the Louisiana Territory. Would you be interested? Well, of course, that's I've always dreamed of doing something like that. So I jumped at the chance. I told him yes. Well, nothing happened then. But in 1805, like I said, I've been noticed by I've been noticed by General James Wilkinson, who was commander of the U.S. Army, and he had just been made governor of the Louisiana Territory. And he summoned me to Fort Bellefontaine in St. Louis, and he asked me, would you like to lead an expedition up the Mississippi River all the way to the headwaters and find the headwaters? Well, of course, I would, and I readily accepted. He told me the goals of my mission would be to make friends with all the Indians along the way, to make peace treaties with the different tribes who were always at war, let them know that they had a new great father in Washington who would now be taking care of them. I was to look in on all the British fur traders and make sure they knew that they were to answer to the United States now and pay taxes, and also find the headwaters of the Mississippi River. General Wilkinson said that I should be back before winter set in. Well, I didn't leave till September 21st. And I wasn't very well outfitted. My men and I weren't trained on the instruments we were to use. Our clothes and supplies weren't adequate for this adventure. But being the dedicated guy I was, we left on September 21st. We did make friends with a lot of the Indians along the way. We did sign a few treaties. Oh, I forgot to mention I was supposed to buy land from the Indians for future forts up along the Mississippi River. And I did buy some land from the Indians, 100,000 acres for only a few trinkets. That was a pretty good deal. And but winter set in, and we weren't prepared for winter. And we ran into incredible hardships. We almost died, froze to death, starved to death. But if it wasn't for some friendly Indians and British fur traders, I'm sure we wouldn't have made it back. We were supposed to be back before winter set in. We got back the next April 5th. I was only back a few days when General Wilkinson summoned me to his quarters at Fort Bellefontaine, and he said, I'd like you to lead an expedition to explore the mid part of the Louisiana Territory. Well, my men and I were exhausted. I missed Clarissa something terrible, and I wanted to rest and recover from my expedition, but I thought, I can't turn this down. This is something that I might become famous for. So anyway, I readily accepted. And on July 5th, we left on our journey. Supposed to be back before winter set in. My men and I were dressed in our summer uniforms, and this wouldn't have been part of the summer uniform. We were dressed in our summer uniforms, and again, we weren't prepared. We didn't have the right equipment and supplies to be out where we were. General Wilkinson told me the goals of my mission were, again, make friends with all the Indians, make peace treaties with all the Indians along the way, repatriate 51 Osage Indians who had been captured by the Potawatomis, repatriate them back to their tribe as a show of good faith from the United States government. First and foremost, to find the Comanche Indians. And the United States thought at the time the Comanche Indians were at war with the Spanish, and also controlled all the southern part of the Louisiana Purchase. So he thought that was one of my main goals, to make friends with the Comanches. And also find the headwaters of the Arkansas River, the headwaters of the Red River, which at the time was thought to be in the Rocky Mountains where the headwaters of the Arkansas started. I was to descend the Red River back to the United States. And on the way back, kind of look in on the Spanish. Now, I forgot to mention, the Spanish in the United States were about to go to war over the borders of the Louisiana Territory, which the Spanish didn't agree with at all. And also the terms. The Spanish had recently just ceded the Louisiana Territory to the French in 1793. Well, here it is 10 years later, and the French are selling it. And one of the conditions the Spanish told them when they ceded that Louisiana Territory to the French was never sell it to an English-speaking country and inform us of any impending sale. Neither condition which was met. Plus, the borders were very vague, and like I said, the United States and Spain were about to go to war. So General Wilkinson wanted me to, on the way back, just kind of see what the Spanish were doing. As I said, I left on July 5th of 1806. July 15th, 1806. We successfully repatriated the Osage Indians, made friends with a lot of the Indians along the way, went up to see the Pawnee Indians, and they had just recently been visited by 300 Spanish dragoons. And the Spanish told them, turn back any Americans you see in this territory. The Spanish thought they were still in control. And they told send back any Americans. So we got to the Pawnee village, and they were somewhat hostile to us. But by sheer force of will, they didn't turn us back, and we continued on our mission. We went south down to the Arkansas River, where I sent several of my men back to the United States with letters and other things that we had collected along the way. And we continued on to the Arkansas. About November, the weather started to turn on us, and it started to get cold. And as I said, my men and I weren't prepared to be out in the winter. And so this is about November 11th. We stopped on the river, and I gathered my men, and I said, do we want to continue on this mission, or should we turn back? Because we're not prepared for the hardships we're about to endure out here in what I call the desert. And of course, I was real patriotic. I wanted to go on. I wanted to fulfill the goals of my mission. And my men, being very good men, decided they would follow me anywhere, which made me really happy, despite the conditions we were just about ready to endure. About November 15th, we were coming up the Arkansas River, and I looked in the distance, and I saw what appeared to be a small blue cloud. Upon further examination through my spyglass, I was more confirmed in my conjecture that that wasn't a cloud. It was a mountain, a very tall mountain. Several miles later down the trail, on top of the hill, my men saw the mountain too. He said, all hail the Mexican mountains. Well, I thought, if I could climb to the top of that peak, which I call the Grand Peak, or the Blue Mountain, if I could get to the top of that, I could see forever. And as I was making maps for General Wilkinson and Thomas Jefferson, that I would be able to lay out and get a good lay of the land from the top of that peak, which I thought to be maybe a day or two march away.
He hasn't been very good at judging distances, especially since where we're from. We don't have majestic mountains like you do.
Anyway, it wasn't several days. We marched up the river. 7 days later, we got to a place called
Avondale.
And there we were accosted by a party of 60 Pawnee warriors. And the Pawnee were at war with the Comanche Indians. And they were looking for Comanches but didn't find them. But they found us, 16 of us against 60 Pawnees. Well, at first things went pretty good. We gave them some gifts. We sat around, we smoked, passed out gifts, but they didn't like the gifts we gave them. And they became hostile, and they started stealing everything they could get their hands on. I was horrified. I didn't know what to do. I just knew if we lost everything, that would be the end of all of us. So I took out my gun, I fired a shot in the air, and I told the Pawnee chief, the next man who touches any of our baggage, I'll shoot dead. Well, the Pawnee, they backed off. They stole some of our stuff, but they continued on down the river back to the Pawnee Nation. And my men and I hurriedly continued up the river. We came to a place where a stream ran in to the Arkansas from what I guessed was the Grand Peak. And I thought, from this spot, this would be a good place to follow that stream up to the peak and climb to the top. And what was that? The name of that place is called? Pueblo. Yeah. Anyway, we built a small stockade for the defense of my men because I was afraid there was still hostiles in the area. And I thought we built a stockade. And that afternoon at 1 o'clock, we left to go climb the mountain, which I figured we would get to the base that afternoon.
Oh, Lord. Sorry, misjudged that one.
I did. 3 days later, we finally got to the base of that mountain after enduring hardships in our summer clothes. The weather was cold. We got hungry. We did get to the base of the mountain, climbed up a nearby peak after going 48 hours without food, dressed in our summer clothes. Some of my men didn't even have socks. Waist deep snow. I looked in the distance and I saw that the Grand Peak was again as high as the mountain we just ascended and about 15 or 16 miles away. And I knew then that under these conditions, no man would ever be able to ascend to the pinnacle of that peak. So we returned back to our stockade and the next day continued on our march up the Arkansas River to find the headwaters. We got to a place on the Arkansas where, and I should mention that we were following the Spanish. We were following the Spanish trail. And anyway, we lost the trail in a snowstorm. And we got to a point where there was a very deep gorge. And I thought, that isn't the river we're supposed to be following. And I made a horrible mistake, and I'll admit it right now. We turned away from, well, I thought we were going up the river, but it wasn't. We turned away, we went north. We got lost in the mountains in December. Again, not prepared to be out, not prepared to be in the mountains, short of food, and lost. I did discover the Platte River, so that was good. And in the distance, I saw some very tall mountains to the west that I call the Great White Mountains. And I thought if we could get to those mountains, that's where the Red River starts. And if we can get there and find that river, we'll descend it back to the United States, all will be good. So we marched a few days and we did find the river. And my men were so happy that we found the Red River. We marched down that river and most of the month of December, very cold, lots of hardship. And anyway, came through a very deep, narrow gorge. What do they call it now?
Royal.
Majesty,
no, Royal.
Royal Gorge. And coming out of that gorge, January 5th, it was my 28th birthday, one of the worst days of my life. I realized we were back at the exact same place where we had turned north away from the river. My men and I were very discouraged. Now we were wearing animal skins. We were starving. All our horses were dead except for 2 of them, and they were crazy, completely unusable. So we decided if we were going to survive, we were going to have to walk. We built a place to store some of our baggage. I left 2 of my men behind to guard it, and we marched with 70-pound packs up Great Creek. Is that what it was called? Great Creek. Great Creek. We got into the Wet Mountain Valley, and guess what? Ran into a horrible, horrible snowstorm, way steep snow. We were crossing Great Creek, and we all got wet. 2 of my men's feet completely froze. And the next day, when I went, and we hadn't eaten for a couple of days, went out hunting the next day and got nothing. It's been 3 days since we'd eaten. And the next day I went out again with one of my men. We saw nothing, and I decided that we probably weren't going to make it. And I didn't even want to go back and face my men. Luckily, a buffalo came by, and we shot that buffalo. We got part of it back to the camp. We ate, and we decided we would continue on, but the 2 men with frozen feet, there was no way they could walk. They begged, they pleaded, please don't leave us behind. We'll die out here. But I knew if the rest of us were going to survive, that we had to continue on. So I left as much as I could with them and left them behind. And we continued on down. And when we got to the bottom of that valley, crossing the creek, another one of my men's feet froze, and we had to leave him behind. We crossed the path. We crossed over the mountains, which I knew on the other side of those mountains, the Red River would be over there for sure. The Red River would be there. Crossed over, and we crossed into some great hills of sand. And it's called sand. It looked like a sea in a storm. And I climbed to the top of one of those dunes, looked in the distance, and sure enough, there was a river. And I thought, this is the Red River. My men were, again, we were so happy. We found the Red River, and we'd be able to descend it back to the United States. We marched to the river and up a stream that ran in from the west a little ways, and we built a stockade for the rest and recovery of my men. Several days later, I sent 5 of my men back to rescue the men with frozen feet. When they found them, the men weren't able to walk. When the men came back into camp, they told me, hey, they're unable to walk, and they gave me the bones out of their feet. I was horrified that I was responsible for these men, and they would be crippled for the rest of their life if they even lived. And I determined then that we would, no matter what, we would go back and rescue those men. Several days later, I was out hunting with one of my men, and a civilized Indian and a Spanish soldier rode up on their horses. And they asked, what are you doing? And I said, I lied. I told them we were a party of American hunters descending the Red River back to the United States, and we were lost. And they might have bought that story, but I doubt it. I knew they were going to go and report us to the Spanish. Several days later, 100 Spanish dragoons rode to our stockade. And the captain asked me again, he said, what are you doing here? And again, I lied. I said, we're a party. And we looked like hunters then, dressed in animal skins and ragged. And I said, we're a party of American hunters descending the Red River back to the United States. And he said, United States? This isn't the United States. This is Spanish territory. And you're trespassing. And the Rio del Norte, which is now the Rio Grande. That's right. And he said, you're trespassing, and you're probably spying. You're going to have to go to Santa Fe and answer to Governor Alan Castro. I said, I can't go anywhere. I have 3 men out with frozen feet. Actually, I have 5 men out. I have the 2 men guarding our supplies. And I said, they have to be rescued first. And of course, the Spanish were very gracious. And they sent some of their soldiers, and some followed some of our men, and they rescued those men and brought them to Santa Fe. In the meantime, the men I was left with were marched to Santa Fe to answer for trespassing and possibly spying. When I got there, the governor asked me again what we were doing, and I again told him that we were Americans, hunters, lost. Well, of course, he wasn't buying that story for a second. He confiscated my papers and my journals and stuff, and my maps that I was making. And he said that I would have to answer to the governor in Chihuahua. Marched to Chihuahua to answer to Governor Salcedo there. And he said, you've caused me a great deal of trouble, and I'm determined to find out if you're a spy or not. And they questioned us, they interrogated us, and to determine whether what we were doing in that territory. They did determine we were trespassing and we were spying. But Governor Salcedo decided if they executed us or did anything to us, that would be the spark that caused the war between Spain and the United States. And he didn't want to be responsible. So being a very, very nice person, the Spanish treated us very well, I will have to say. They escorted us back to the United States. So needless to say, my men and I got a grand tour of the Spanish territory. So we got back to Natchitoches down the river, through Spanish territory on the Red River, and returned on July 5th of 1807. I was so happy to see the United States flag fly aloft. See Clarissa. The only bad thing is, unfortunately, I got drugged into a very ugly scene when I got back. I'm sure most of you here have heard of the Burr-Wilkinson conspiracy. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about it in a minute. Anyway, that's my story. Basically, my life up until now, and my journeys in the southern part of this Louisiana territory. I'm now going to come out first person, and I'll tell you a little bit about what was really going on at the time. And a lot of people don't know this. I'm going to read you a couple of quotes, and this is really interesting. If I find my stats. In my possibles bag, I'm sure. General Wilkinson, who was governor of the Louisiana Territory, commander of the U.S. Army, was a cad. He was a no good person, and he was conspiring with Aaron Burr to break off part of the Louisiana Territory and take northern Mexico, and they were going to create their own country, and Aaron Burr was going to be king. Anyway, where's those quotes? These are a couple of quotes that kind of describe James Wilkinson. And this is from Frederick Turner, a historian. He was the most consummate artist in treason the nation has ever seen. Another quote by Teddy Roosevelt. In all our history, there has never been a more despicable character. And this was somebody who was governor of the Louisiana Territory and commander of the U.S. Army, who had been a spy for the Spanish since the 1880s. Had been his age, 1780s. I'm sorry. Who was a pensioner. Yeah, I'm sorry. Since the 1780s, who had been collecting a pension of $4,000 for giving information to the Spanish. Well, also too, he would report back to the United States information on the Spanish. That's just the type of person he was. Anything that was done that he did, there had to be something done. The Spanish had closed off New Orleans to U.S. commerce, but they let James Wilkinson run some of his goods down the Mississippi River into New Orleans. And anyway, when Zebulon Pike got back, they were trying, Aaron Burr had been arrested. Well, being the cad he was, General Wilkinson saw that this was all coming to a head, and it wasn't going to go well for him. So he went straight to Thomas Jefferson and he said, hey, Aaron Burr, he's got these big plans to take part of the Louisiana Territory and northern Mexico. And I'm telling you now, I'm letting you know this is going to happen. Didn't tell Thomas Jefferson that they had been planning this together, of course. Well, Aaron Burr went to trial. Wilkinson testified against him, of course. And Aaron Burr was convicted, got a slap on the hand, went straight to France to Napoleon and asked Napoleon for troops and money to invade Mexico. Anyway, Napoleon by then he didn't have money or troops. So anyway, that was kind of what was going on. The Zebulon Pike got drug into it. It ruined his reputation when he first got back. Everybody thought he was spying for Wilkinson and Burr. He testified in the trial, and he was such a dedicated person that he didn't testify against Wilkinson. He always thought Wilkinson was a great guy and that had got his career going. But his career wasn't going, but he wrote a letter to Secretary of the Army Dearborn and asked him to resurrect his career and his reputation, which Dearborn did. And after that, Pike's career took off again. He got promotions. He got really good assignments, and by the War of 1812, he was promoted to a general. And he commanded troops in the Battle of Yorktown, which is one of the few battles that the United States won during the War of 1812. And at the Battle of Yorktown in 1813, which the United States won, Zebulon Pike, the British blew up their powder magazine. Zebulon Pike was hit in the back with a rock and killed. He was 34 years old. And there was talk about him being possibly president of the United States. He was regarded as the most capable Army officer at the time. So anyway, any questions? How old was Clarissa?
Okay, let's do the math. She was born on February 1803. He was killed in 1813. She was only 10. But she died young too. Older Clarissa outlived them all. Young Clarissa died in childbirth with her sixth child when she was only 33.
She was married to President Harrison's nephew. Right. Anyway, any other? Yes, sir.
Kind of find it hard to understand why you'd be considered such a competent officer when you've done two incompetent expeditions.
Well, you know, when you look at the history back then,
We won't take that personally.
well, I might. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of these officers that were officers in the Army, they weren't officers in the Army because they were good tacticians or good soldiers. They'd never been in the Army. They bought their commissions, and they were men of money and power. So when the
Just
war,
like Clarissa's father.
yeah, but he was a good soldier. But anyway, they weren't good men, and they weren't very capable. That's why it's amazing the United States won the War of 1812. It really is, because we just didn't have capable officers. They weren't good organizers. They weren't very good at equipping their men. And anyway, Zebulon Pike, as his career progressed, you got to understand, when he was first sent out, he was young and he was just sent. He wasn't trained like Lewis and Clark on using any of the instruments of navigation.
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, Lewis and Clark got all the new sophisticated equipment. Pike got all the old stuff.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
if any of that, and he wasn't even trained to use them. And he didn't know what he was getting into both times. He had no idea. You know, he just told, go. So here's some men, go.
And by the way, what Doug's wearing is actually Pike's uniform, not what they would have gone out on the trail. This is something like if you were going to meet the president or a really high chief or something, he would wear something like this.
Married, yeah.
Got married, yeah.
Yes.
So the up to approximately 5 men that got their feet frozen, is that accurate? Is that a?
Only 3 men got their feet frozen. 2 of them were left in Canyon City at the Stone House where they left all of their baggage because they didn't have any horses to be able to take
Did
further.
any of them survive?
All
Yes.
of them did.
You finally
Pike-
killed them, got them?
Pike didn't lose any of
The
his
Spanish got went and got him with some of his men.
I'm saying.
The only one that was killed was actually in
down in Mexico.
Yeah, it was Chihuahua. And it was by one of Pike's own men because he was about ready to turn on Pike and the men and start confessing everything. And so he got killed by one of his own.
They were drunk.
I just wondered if they survived after being rescued.
Well, I'll tell you what happened is when they got back to the United States, Congress wouldn't give Pike and his men a pension for what they'd gone through or anything. And he was always writing letters to Congress and begging them, hey, these men are crippled. They sacrificed for the country. They didn't get anything, and Pike supported them with his own money.
Very much to Clarissa's dismay because little Clarissa needed an Easter dress. And
Needed.
But anyway, it was actually Clarissa herself, after Pike's death, who did petition Congress and who did finally get these men some compensation, the crippled men, some compensation, because they were crippled for the rest of their lives. Well, yeah, feet.
Yes,
I'm curious about how Pike was able to build Pike Stockade in the San Luis Valley with just a few men. And he was, hauled off to Chihuahua. How did that
okay,
work?
well, when he built it, the stockade, he still had 13 men with him. And they built that stockade.
13
He
men.
still had 13 men. He left the 12. He left the 2 in Canyon, and 11, and the 3 and the 3 in the mountains. So yeah, they built the stockade. And have you ever seen it?
Oh,
It's
yeah,
been
yeah,
rebuilt.
yeah.
Yes.
I'm just curious about, as they're preparing to send him on this mission, do they not have any concept, and he's supposed to be back before winter?
See, that's what I'm
Do they have
saying.
a concept of how far?
Well, you're talking Wilkinson, and he was out for himself, basically. Thomas Jefferson didn't authorize Pike to go out into the mid part of the Southwest Territory. Wilkinson sent it. Later on, Thomas Jefferson, well, there's nothing he could do. They were already out. He gave his blessing for it. But Wilkinson was sending Pike out, not Thomas Jefferson. And Wilkinson, why he would send Pike out on these missions without being prepared, like Lewis and Clark or Freeman and Dunbar, who explored the Red River in the southern part of the Louisiana Territory, or some of the other explorers. Pike was just saying, hey, you're going to, he just got back. Well, you're going to leave in a month or so to go on this next one. Get prepared. Well, there's a lot of mystery to this story. And there's a lot of mystery in more ways than one, too. And if you read some of the journals and some of the letters between Pike and Wilkinson and Burr, and Wilkinson and Dearborn, and some of the other people. Dearborn wasn't involved in the conspiracy. But anyway, sometimes I wonder, with all that was going on, Wilkinson and Burr were also trying to break Kentucky and Tennessee and the Ohio Territory away from the United States and attach it to Spain. And they were gathering all these merchants in those territories who had been blocked from using the Mississippi River by the Spanish. Well, if they attached themselves to Spain, they would get access to the Mississippi now, and they could run their merchandise up and down. So they almost succeeded in that. They had a lot of men behind that, but eventually they decided not to. So, but that was real close to happening. Yes.
What year was the peak named after you?
That would have been when Stephen F. Long came out, and I think it was in 1820. His doctor, Dr. James, and this was in July, he climbed the peak. And Stephen F. Long named it after Dr. James. He named it James Peak, which it went by for a long time. But later on, a lot of the people who came out west had Pike's map. And when they looked at the map, they would say, that's Pike's Peak. And at about 1846, it stuck. So there was something else I was going to say too along with that. But anyway. Yes.
When you said that they climbed one mountain and they looked over and they saw Pike's Peak 16 miles away, was that Mount Rosa
Yes.
that they climbed?
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy over the years what mountain that was, but it's finally been, the consensus is it was Mount Rosa. So,
And cool little fact about Mount Rosa for our Heritage Night in February, we're gonna have author Tamara Teal, who happened just a few moments ago right out there, doing Heritage Night about the Kingsleys and their influence here. And Rose Kingsley is who that Mount Rosa is named after. It's kind of a pyramid-looking mountain.
Yeah.
So she'll be doing the February 2024 Heritage Night.
okay.
Yeah, actually,
One more.
let's do 2 more questions publicly, and then we'll be able to do lots of questions after that. So go ahead. Yeah.
What's the vermilion used for? They give to the Indians paint mixed with water. They could paint their horse or their teepee or their face or whatever. That was a big trade on. What were the trinkets? When you come up here, of course, to make friends with the Indians. What were they? What did you give them? They're right up here. Just beads, necklaces, metal things. They like metal things. And anyway, yeah, you want to be friends, give somebody a gift. Don't be your friend.
Kids won't, they're looking at funny. Will you be my friend if I give you this? No.
Although the gifts that Pike had for the Pawnee weren't good enough because the Spanish had already given some really cool stuff. So,
Yeah. External metal.
well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, let's do a round of applause. As you can see, I've got my Pike Peak Drink here. They still have drinks out there, and we actually just got a bunch of free popcorn as well. So feel free to have some of that. Maybe we'll make you thirsty. And then, of course, they also have snacks out there too, like these delicious honey buns I'm enjoying. Definitely support local businesses. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Again, I'm Merle Jones, the director here at the Pueblo Heritage Museum. And just thanks for coming out. Feel free to come and ask questions. And the museum is open as well as the gift shop right across this way. Thank you all. Free popcorn over here. This is free.